Wendy, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you? Sorry, my dog's barking. Thinks somebody's here.
I have a barkable voice too. So, all right. So before we jump in, where are you and what are you working on?
I am in Belgrade, Montana, in my studio, and I am a painter, oil painter, when I try to sell my paintings. And I do teaching classes in my studio. I do those really kooky, fun sip and paint classes. And then I also just started for the first time my first serious oil painting workshop, which was like out of the comfort zone thing.
Great. Well, congrats on stepping out of your comfort zone. How'd it go?
Good. I mean, it's 6 weeks, so I've been into 4 weeks of it, and it's good. Trying not to let everyone see that I'm not sure of myself. But I told them I'm a beginner at doing this, so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, something that's really great to think about is like we're all beginners at something, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's great to be a beginner because you approach things differently. So thanks for being a beginner and modeling that. All
yeah,
right.
I think it keeps people less scared. They know who are too, you know.
Alrighty. So do you need help picking your 5 things for the year, or is it one of those things where you have one that you're not sure how to break down?
I have one major one that I'm working on breaking down.
Okay. So
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So it's an art show at a big, it's called Western Art Week, and up in Great Falls, Montana at the Charlie Russell Museum, who's an internationally known Western cowboy artist. So they have an auction, 2 auctions every year, and I have 2 paintings in the Friday night auction, and it's been the 4th year that I've been honored to be in that. But now I stepped out of my box again, and I'm having my own booth.
Okay.
So I've done these before, and I get really freaked out and actually sick doing it with migraines from anxiety. So I've learned that like more planning makes me less stressful. So I've gone to the thing of like, okay, what size paintings do I need to do? How long is it going to take me to do them? And then it all kind of blows up. And if I really had a more specific plan, I mean, I only have a month left.
Okay. That's good to know. So we're going to focus on the month. Okay. I think there are several things, knowing what it does, knowing what it means to run a booth at an art show. It looks like you have several things going on. One is the actual pieces that you need to create to be at the booth.
Right.
The second is figuring out what you want your booth to look like the presentation of the booth and everything like that. That's independent of the pieces that's going to be put there. So like what technology are you going to need? Are you going to have, business cards, like whatever you're trying to do with the book, there's like the stuff you put in the booth and then the booth you got to build itself. Then I would also probably say you probably have something around marketing, either, the show and tell about doing it, the work that you're doing and everything about the work you're showing there, that you were there, so on and so forth. So there's always, in an art business or in any business, there's always the marketing and talking about what you're doing. There's 3 major chunks that I can think of off the top of my head. What else is there as far as major buckets of things we need to be thinking about?
Well, I visually have the booth in my mind and how I like to have it set up, the rug and the table and the computer thing. The technology is one I didn't think of, because you can have slideshows going. But the other thing is like, what size paintings am I actually going to have so that I can order frames? Mm-hmm. And it's like I decided the sizes, but then now that's changing and morphing into different, and then you get my fears at the end, just not having it all together.
Yeah. So, and someone also mentioned staffing. So are you going to have someone staff the booth, or are you just going to staff the booth?
I'm having a friend help me.
Okay, great. So there is staffing happening. So 4 buckets there. It seems like more of the stress your emphasis has been on focusing on the pieces that go into booth, more so than other aspects of the booth. Is that because that's where most of your stress is, or is it? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I knew today, all the painting clearly be less stressed, and then I could get on to the other planning pieces.
Okay. So in the planning world, you've sort of talked about what we like to call a critical path. Like once you have that critical path figured out, you can do everything else. But unless you have that, you're going to be stuck, right?
Yes.
Is there any information outside of what's currently is sitting in the virtual room that you need to be able to determine what paintings you're going to do?
Well, I know it's a 10 by 10 foot booth.
Okay.
So that means 3 walls of 10 by 10.
Okay.
No, 3 walls of 10 by 6.
Okay. So what does that mean for your work?
That I need to figure out what sizes fit in that, which I've done before. Like I've actually drawn it out, but then that changes when you get there.
Okay. So I would say for planning purposes right now, because so much is stuck on that your biggest thing to figure out is what those look like, right? And I think it's might be picking today, understanding that it might need to change because once you get there, it might change and you don't know how it's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite quotes when planning is from Donald Rumsfeld, which I know is a controversial figure, but it's like, they're the known knowns, they're the known unknowns, and they're the unknown unknowns, right? And a known unknown is that like the space could change on you or something different could happen. But we can't be stuck with that because we know that it might be there. How do we accomplish that? And then there's the unknown unknowns that you can't really figure out. You just have to be able to adapt and dance on the fly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so seems like the easiest way to go would be to pick the size of work that is going to be big enough to represent and be a good quality of your work, but not so big that you can't move it around.
Right.
Right.
And also like you have to have different price points of sizes of pieces.
Yep. So, so it seems like since you have a month and you have a four weeks following, or when is the actual date?
Actually, March 21st, but I was making myself be done with paintings by the 1st of March.
Okay. Okay. So, let's see, how do I want to draw this? I'll draw it this way. 1, 2. I'm going to run out of space that way, so I'll just do it this way. And then week 4. This roughly represents whatever version of the weekly momentum planner and the monthly momentum planner that you might use. So if you're following along, you'll see that when you go to the week size chunks, you'll see that there are weeks that have 5 lines. And so that's where we would start to be able to do some of this chunking that we've talked about here. Okay. What I would say here is that in week 1, which is the week that's right next week, I'm saying we're not going to have much time left because it's Thursday this week and you probably got other things to do. Next week is when you do whatever research and decide on what size paintings you're going to do. And that's going to give you 3 weeks to finish the painting, but you got to decide somewhere unless you're going to decide over the weekend. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so decide what, like I usually work on multiple paintings at the same time.
That's great. I think what I heard is that you're trying to decide on the sizes, not necessarily the paintings themselves.
Okay, yeah.
So decide on paint sizes for the art show. You know what art show it is, everything like that. So I'm not going to write it out by the end of next week.
Okay.
What else would you need to do by the end of next week? And you can say nothing else. If I do that, that's fine.
Once I know the sizes, then I can order my frames because my framer has to build the frames.
All right. So this is where we say probably this week, order frames for the art show.
Okay.
What would be next? as far as the paintings go?
Um, I have to, I have to varnish. I have to make titles, and I really work hard on good titles because I think it makes the paintings more engaging.
So, do you want to say finished paintings? Like, and you know that that's varnishing and that's titling?
Oh, maybe that would be in the last week.
Okay, so what's in the third week?
I think the third week I'm still going to be painting.
Okay, so I'm going to say finished painting. Pieces for art show. If I were really looking at your total list, I would probably say that's going to eat up about 3 or 4 of your projects. You don't get to do much else that week, because if you try to do everything else, then your work will suffer, right? Since you're on the timeline that you are. And
I know I teach classes too. So that's my biggest struggle is I teach, I paint, I teach, I scheduled classes, I market classes. And I mean, that's why we're all creative entrepreneurs, right? But
yeah. But whatever you're looking at, like if we were doing the full process, what I would say is when you get to that week 3, knowing the process of creating the art and things like that, you would definitely want to make sure that you're not overstacking that week with other projects, which might mean punting some work. It might mean, that we scoot some of that work into this week or into this week so that you can clear the decks for your painting. And so it's like Kimberly Coe, who I know is also an artist. She says, I always reduce my classes right before and after one of these events, right? Because you have to be able to get it done. I'm the same way when I'm on a writing deadline the week before, like I really underplan that week just so I can focus on the work.
It's hard to not want to keep touching all those things that might fall apart if you don't. I think that's a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a struggle, but you have to think about what falls apart by you trying to keep everything together versus letting some things go.
Yeah. Well, and I think your focus blocks, like the days I've decided just to have painting days, I have all painting days. I do let that other stuff fall off, and that's been huge for me.
Yeah. So keep doing that, and just, that last week might be your focus or your sprint week, and that's just what you do, and things fall off. That's where you order take-in. That's where, you don't go on as many coffee dates, so on and so forth. Like all those things you do to focus on the work.
Okay.
Okay. Then week 4, you can kind of see how you can do sort of that for this sort of thing. But remember, I would encourage you to do some brainstorming on those 4 buckets we talked about, which is the painting, which is what we focused on here, because that's been such a, like, once you had that figured out, the rest of it will flow for you. And so though you have until the end of next week to figure out deciding on the painting, like the sooner you get that done, the more I think you're going to have clarity about everything else. And so you may be able to pull some of the other things forward. But if you hem-haw on that because of life and things like that, or because of indecisiveness, then that means everything else gets crunched after that. Right. And so what I do with clients on this one is like, the reality is there's probably not anything outside of like research anything that, like, you can't do that by Tuesday of next week, right? After Tuesday, you're probably just procrastinating or like letting time feel. So I would encourage sort of the same thing for you. By Tuesday of next week, have that decided so that you can really start getting into the painting and ordering and the logistics around it. Okay. But your schedule better than I do. You might be super busy Monday and Tuesday, and that might not work. So, but that would be how we would do a project like this. We would just go through there and put the pieces in where they go, and then come back and say, okay, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to do? Until you get it all filled out. But there are 2 tricky things. I'm going to say this for everyone. Trying to manage multiple slices, multiple time perspectives at a time can be really confusing. Notice why this may be simpler is because we're just talking about the month and the weeks. We can do that. If we tried to add in the quarter on top of that, it would be like, whoa, wait a second, there's too much going on. And then I got to go down a level of detail. Then I got to go up a level of detail. So you really want to constrain your time perspectives so that you're not thinking about too much at the same time. And then the second piece is
Constrain me, focus down.
focus down. Focus down. So whenever you're overwhelmed, usually I will tell people to focus down and just figure out some of these things like what size paintings do you need? But whenever you're like, I'm not sure how this fits all together, that's when you zoom up to the next higher and say, really, what's the point of all this? Oh yeah, the art show. That's why I'm doing all this sort of stuff. And then you can sort of look at why that's important to your business. Like if you like, why is the art show important? It's tied to some other goal above that's important in case you needed to go there.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's lots of them, but I feel like it's time for you to go to someone else.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.